Tell someone that $100 a month for 40 years can become close to $700,000 and watch their face. Not the face of someone absorbing useful information, the face of someone deciding whether you're exaggerating, oversimplifying, or trying to sell them something. It is one of the most consistently disbelieved facts in all of personal finance, not because the math is controversial or disputed among anyone who actually understands it, but because the number feels so disproportionate to the input that the human brain instinctively rejects it as too good to be real. $100 a month is $1,200 a year. Over 40 years, that's $48,000 in total contributions, a number that feels entirely reasonable, entirely proportionate, entirely believable. Most people could imagine saving $48,000 over 4 decades without much difficulty. It sounds like a modest, unremarkable achievement. The actual ending balance, invested consistently in a low-cost S&P 500 index fund at the historical average annual return of approximately 10%, is not $48,000. It is approximately $632,000. Not because of any special trick, not because of insider knowledge, a favorable market timing decision, or a fund that outperformed everything else available to ordinary investors. Just $100 a month, automated, invested in the most boring, widely available, zero-skill required investment vehicle in the world, left completely alone for 40 years. This video exists for one reason: to make that number believable, not by asking you to trust it, but by walking through exactly where it comes from, piece by piece, so that the disbelief most people feel when they first hear it gets replaced with the kind of understanding that actually changes behavior. Because here is the uncomfortable truth underneath the disbelief. The reason this number feels unbelievable is the same reason most people never actually experience it. If the math felt obviously true, more people would act on it immediately. Since it feels implausible, most people quietly dismiss it, keep their $100 monthly in spending instead of investing, and never find out what they gave up. Quick favor before we begin: if you find yourself watching videos like this regularly, you might as well subscribe now. And don't forget to hit like. It's one of the easiest ways to support the channel. Let's get started. Part 1. The number itself broken into pieces you can verify. Let's build the $632,000 figure from scratch, with every component visible, so there is no step in the calculation that requires taking anything on faith. The contribution: $100 monthly, $1,200 annually, for 40 years. Total principal contributed, $48,000. This is the only number in the entire calculation that comes directly out of your bank account. Everything beyond $48,000 is generated by the investment itself. The return assumption: 10% average annual return, which is the historical average annual return of the S&P 500 index from 1957, when the index in its modern 500 company form was established, through 2024, according to data compiled by Macro Trends and corroborated by S&P Dow Jones indices. This is not a cherry-picked figure or an optimistic projection. It is the documented long-term historical average, inclusive of every recession, every crash, every period of high inflation, and every geopolitical crisis that occurred during those 67 years. The compounding mechanism: each month's $100 contribution begins earning returns immediately, and the returns earned in every previous month also continue earning returns in every subsequent month. This is the entire secret, and it is not actually a secret. It is arithmetic, applied consistently across 480 monthly contributions. Using the standard future value of an annuity formula, the same formula every financial calculator, retirement planning tool, and introductory finance textbook uses for this exact calculation: $100 monthly at 10% annual return, assumed compounded monthly at approximately 0.83% per month, for 480 months, produces a final balance of approximately $632,000. You can verify this number yourself in under 30 seconds using any free online compound interest calculator. NerdWallet, Bankrate, Investor.gov, the U.S. government's own investor education website maintained by the Securities and Exchange Commission, all offer free calculators that will produce this same figure when you input $100 monthly, 10% annual return, and 40 years. This is not a number that exists only in this video. It is a number that exists in the standard mathematics of compound growth, verifiable by anyone with an internet connection and 30 seconds. The gap between $48,000 contributed and $632,000 received, $584,000, is not money you saved. It is money the market generated entirely as a function of time and the compounding mechanism, attached to contributions that were individually completely unremarkable. Part 2. Why the growth curve feels like a lie until year 25. The reason this number is so widely disbelieved is not a failure of math literacy. It is a failure of intuition, and the failure has a specific, identifiable cause. Compound growth is exponential, and human intuition is built for linear relationships. Here is what the $100 monthly investment actually looks like at different points along its 40-year journey, using the same 10% annual return assumption. After 5 years, $7,808. Total contributed $6,000. Growth, $1,808. After 10 years, $20,484. Total contributed $12,000. Growth, $8,484. After 15 years, $41,447. Total contributed $18,000. Growth, $23,447. After 20 years, $75,937. Total contributed $24,000. Growth, $51,937. After 25 years, $132,683. Total contributed $30,000. Growth, $102,683. After 30 years, $226,054. Total contributed $36,000. Growth, $190,049. After 35 years, $379,664. Total contributed $42,000. Growth, $337,664. After 40 years, $632,408. Total contributed $48,000. Growth, $584,408. Look closely at the pattern in these numbers. For the first 15 years, the balance is genuinely unimpressive. $7,808 after half a decade of consistent contribution. $20,484 after a full decade. These numbers do not feel like the beginning of a path to $632,000. They feel like modest, slow, barely noticeable progress, the kind of progress that makes people quietly wonder whether the strategy is actually working, whether they should be doing something different, whether the $100 would be better spent on something with a more immediate, visible benefit. This is precisely the period where most people quit, not because the strategy has failed, but because the exponential curve hasn't yet produced results that feel proportionate to the patience required to maintain it. Then look at what happens in the second half. Between year 20 and year 40, the balance grows by $556,471, nearly 9 times more growth than occurred in the first 20 years, from the same $100 monthly contribution that never changed. The growth in the final 5 years alone, from $379,664 to $232,408, a gain of $252,744, exceeds the entire balance accumulated during the first 30 years combined. This is not a quirk of this particular calculation. It is the defining mathematical signature of exponential growth. The curve looks almost flat for a long time, then turns sharply upward in a way that feels almost disconnected from everything that came before it. Nobody believes the $632,000 figure when they're looking at the $20,484 10-year mark, because the 10-year mark genuinely does not look like it's on a trajectory towards $632,000. The disbelief is not irrational. It is a completely understandable response to looking at the early, unimpressive section of a curve that only reveals its true shape much later. Part 3. The Rule of 72 makes the curve intuitive. There is a simple mental shortcut that converts this abstract growth curve into something genuinely intuitive: the Rule of 72. Divide 72 by your annual return rate to get the approximate number of years required for your money to double. At a 10% annual return, money doubles approximately every 7.2 years. Applied to the $100 monthly investment, here is what the doubling sequence looks like starting from the 10-year mark of $20,484 and tracking forward in roughly 7.2-year doubling intervals. $20,484 becomes approximately $41,000 around year 17. $41,000 becomes approximately $82,000 around year 24. $82,000 becomes approximately $164,000 around year 31. $164,000 becomes approximately $328,000 around year 38. And the pattern continues towards $632,000 by year 40. Accounting for the ongoing contributions still being added throughout this entire doubling sequence. The Rule of 72 makes a critical feature of compound growth immediately obvious. Each doubling period adds more in absolute dollars than every previous doubling, because each doubling is operating on a larger base. The first doubling, from roughly $10,000 to $20,000, adds $10,000. A later doubling, from $160,000 to $320,000, adds $160,000, 16 times more dollar growth from the exact same percentage return, simply because the base being doubled is 16 times larger. This is the mathematical reason why the late years of any long-term investment produce dramatically more absolute growth than the early years, even when the percentage return never changes. It is also the mathematical reason why stopping a long-term investment strategy early, at year 15, at year 20, even at year 30, sacrifices a disproportionate share of the total growth, because the largest doublings happen at the end, on top of the largest base, and they never get the chance to occur if the money is withdrawn or the contributions stop before they arrive. Part 4. What happens if you start later? The cost of delay in dollars. The $632,000 figure assumes a 40-year investment horizon. Most people encountering this video are not starting at the theoretical beginning of a 40-year window. Understanding exactly what delay costs in specific dollar terms converts an abstract sense of urgency into a precise, motivating number. Starting at 25, investing $100 monthly until 65, a 40-year horizon, produces the full $632,408 figure already established. Starting at 30 instead of 25, a 35-year horizon produces $379,664, using the same figure already calculated in the growth table above. The 5-year delay costs $252,744 in final balance. 5 years of waiting at $100 monthly, each representing $6,000 in foregone contributions, costs over $252,000 in final wealth, a multiplier of approximately 42 times the nominal amount of contributions that were delayed. Starting at 35 instead of 25, a 30-year horizon produces $226,049. The 10-year delay costs $406,359 compared to starting at 25. 10 years of waiting, representing $12,000 in nominal contributions not made, costs over $406,000 in final wealth. Starting at 45 instead of 25, a 20-year horizon produces $75,937. The 20-year delay costs $556,471 compared to starting at 25. 20 years of waiting, exactly half of the original 40-year window, costs 88% of the total potential outcome. This is the second deeply counterintuitive feature of compound growth that explains why so many financial decisions get made incorrectly. The cost of delay is not proportional to the length of the delay. Waiting half as long, 20 years instead of 40, does not cost half as much wealth. It costs 88% of the total potential wealth, because the portion of the timeline that gets eliminated by starting late is specifically the portion of the timeline where the largest doublings occur. There is no version of this math where starting later is mathematically neutral. Every year of delay, regardless of when it occurs in someone's life, eliminates a year of compounding that can never be recovered by contributing later. A 45-year-old who decides to catch up by contributing $300 monthly instead of $100 monthly to compensate for 20 years of non-participation reaches age 65 with approximately $227,000, still roughly $405,000 short of what the original $100 monthly, started at 25, would have produced. Tripling the contribution rate cannot fully compensate for the lost early years, because the years that were lost were specifically the years where the smallest contributions had the most time remaining to compound.
Part 5. What happens if the amount is larger than $100? The $100 figure in this video's title is deliberately modest, chosen specifically because it is achievable for the overwhelming majority of working people, regardless of income level, without requiring significant lifestyle sacrifice. But the same mathematics scales linearly with contribution size, and seeing the scaled versions reinforces just how powerful the underlying mechanism is. $200 monthly for 40 years at 10% annual returns is approximately $1,264,816. Double the contribution, double the result. The relationship between contribution size and final balance is linear, even though the relationship between time and final balance is exponential. $500 monthly for 40 years is approximately $3,162,040. $1,000 monthly for 40 years is approximately $6,324,080. These figures make a critical point about the actual lever available to most people building wealth. You don't control the market's return. You don't meaningfully improve your outcome by trying to time entries and exits or by selecting individual stocks instead of a diversified index. The extensive research on investor behavior, including Dalbar's long-running quantitative analysis of investor behavior, consistently shows that attempts to outperform the market through active decision-making typically underperform simply holding a diversified index fund and leaving it alone. What you actually control is contribution amount and start date. Those are the two genuinely controllable variables in this entire equation, and the math above demonstrates exactly how much leverage each one provides. Someone who cannot currently find $100 monthly might find $50, which produces approximately $316,000 over 40 years, still a meaningful sum from contributions most working adults could locate within their existing budget through modest adjustments. Someone who can find $300 monthly reaches approximately $1.9 million over the same horizon.
Part 6. Where the $100 a month actually comes from. The reason most people never start this calculation in their own life, despite believing the math once they see it clearly, is that $100 monthly feels like it has to come from somewhere, and most household budgets feel, at least at first glance, like they have no available $100. This feeling is usually inaccurate, and a brief specific accounting of common unexamined monthly spending categories demonstrates why. The average American household subscribes to multiple recurring services they no longer actively use, collectively averaging $219 monthly in total subscription spending, according to research from C+R Research, a figure that includes services people have frequently forgotten they're still paying for. A subscription audit recovering even half of an unused subscription allocation easily produces $50 to $100 monthly. The average daily coffee shop habit at $6 per workday totals approximately $130 monthly. Brewing coffee at home for the same workdays costs approximately $15 to $20 monthly. The difference, $110 to $115 monthly, exceeds the entire $100 target on its own. The average household's food delivery and convenience spending, when audited honestly against grocery equivalent costs for the same meals, frequently reveals $100 to $200 monthly in premium spending for convenience that, on reflection, was not consciously chosen as a priority. This is not an argument that everyone should eliminate coffee, deliveries, or every subscription. It is pointing out a specific, calculable fact. The $100 monthly that becomes $632,000 over 40 years is, for the overwhelming majority of working households, not an amount that requires new income or significant lifestyle sacrifice to locate. It is an amount that exists already, distributed in small, individually unremarkable amounts across spending categories that were never evaluated against the alternative of investing the same money instead.
Part 7. Why the vehicle matters as much as the amount. The $632,000 figure depends entirely on the 10% average annual return assumption, which requires the $100 to actually be invested in a diversified, low-cost equity index fund, not simply set aside in a standard savings account. The average national savings account interest rate, according to FDIC data, hovers in the range of 0.4% to 0.6% annually for traditional savings accounts at major banks, though high-yield savings accounts on online banks currently offer 4 to 5%. At even the higher 4.5% rate available through a high-yield savings account, $100 monthly for 40 years produces approximately $147,000, a respectable and genuinely useful sum, but less than a quarter of the $632,000 the same monthly contribution produces in a stock market index fund. This is the single most consequential decision in the entire process, and it requires almost no additional effort compared to simply saving the money. Which account and which investment inside that account receives the $100 each month? A Roth IRA, available to any individual earning under the current income limits, with a 2025 contribution limit of $7,000 annually, comfortably accommodating a $1,200 annual contribution, held in a single low-cost total market or S&P 500 index fund, such as Vanguard's VOO or Fidelity's FZROX, both available with expense ratios below 0.05% annually, produces the full $632,000 trajectory while growing entirely tax-free. The mechanical steps required to set this up, opening a Roth IRA at a major brokerage, selecting a single low-cost index fund, and setting up an automatic monthly transfer of $100 from a checking account, take approximately 15 minutes and require no ongoing monthly decisions once established. The $632,000 outcome is not produced by sophisticated investment management. It is produced by choosing the correct account and fund once and then doing nothing else for 40 years.
The number that opened this video, $100 monthly, becoming approximately $632,000 over 40 years, is not a trick, an exaggeration, or a best-case scenario cherry-picked to make a compelling headline. It is the documented, verifiable, historically grounded output of the most ordinary investment behavior available. A small, consistent monthly contribution placed in a low-cost, diversified index fund, left alone for 4 decades. The disbelief most people feel when they first encounter this number is not a failure of intelligence. It is the entirely predictable result of asking a linear thinking brain to grasp an exponential process. The early years look unimpressive because they are unimpressive in absolute dollar terms. $7,808 after 5 years does not look like the beginning of anything remarkable. The unimpressive appearance of the early years is precisely why so many people quit before the curve reveals what it was actually building toward. The math does not require belief to work. It requires only the contribution, the correct account and fund, and the patience to leave it alone through the long, flat, unconvincing first half of the curve in order to reach the second half, where 9 times more growth occurs than in the entire first half combined. $48,000 contributed, $632,000 received. The $584,000 difference was not earned through labor, risk-taking insight, or financial sophistication. It was generated by time, acting on a number small enough that almost anyone reading this could locate in their own monthly budget by this time tomorrow. The disbelief is understandable. The math is not negotiable. And the 40 years it requires are going to pass regardless of whether the $100 is invested or spent. The only question the math actually leaves open is which one you'll choose to do with it, starting this month.